My name is Kira Atherton. At 32, I've always felt like an enigma to my family in Farnham Ridge, Montana. My parents, especially my father, Wallace Albright, met my military career with a blend of confusion and thinly veiled disappointment. They lauded my brother, Braxton Thorne, and his rapid rise at Viridian Corp, constantly suggesting I'd squandered my potential. Their casual dismissal, their certainty I'd never amount to anything in the armed forces, became a quiet fuel. Their words, once stinging, now felt hollow. This wasn't indifference, it was a deep, resonant calm, the quiet certainty of a storm brewing, one they were entirely unprepared for. Subscribe and like if you resonate with proving your worth. For years, I lived a dual existence. To them, I was vaguely in the service, doing something respectable but ultimately insignificant, something that kept me far away from the real world of corporate success and social climbing. They pictured me in a drab office, shuffling papers, perhaps managing a small team of clerical staff. They envisioned a life devoid of ambition, a safe but unfulfilling existence. To the Department of Defense, however, I was a rising star, a relentless problem solver, a woman who saw patterns in the digital ether that others missed. My specialty was cybersecurity defense systems, a field that demanded a mind both analytical and intuitive, capable of anticipating threats before they materialized and devising impenetrable countermeasures. It was a world of zeros and ones, of encrypted pathways and algorithmic warfare, a universe light years away from the quaint traditional values of Farnham Ridge, where a good job meant a corner office and a steady climb up the corporate ladder. My journey wasn't glamorous. It was marked by grueling training exercises in simulated hostile environments where the smell of simulated smoke and the sound of distant gunfire were constant companions. It involved countless all-nighters hunched over glowing screens, debugging complex code, meticulously analyzing network traffic, and identifying the minutest anomalies. Each promotion carried the weight of increased responsibility, a heavy mantle that settled on my shoulders. Every stripe, each pip, each gleaming silver eagle I earned was a quiet victory, a rebuttal to the silent judgment of my family. They imagined me filing papers, maybe barking orders at recruits. They couldn't conceive of the highly classified strategic war rooms I inhabited, the multi-million-dollar contracts I advised on, or the top-tier security protocols I helped design that protected national secrets from the most sophisticated cyber adversaries. The idea that their daughter, the one who preferred solitary evenings with books to social gatherings, the one who joined the military instead of going to business school, could command such authority and possess such critical expertise was simply beyond their comprehension. And I let them remain oblivious. It wasn't malicious, not entirely. It was a form of self-preservation, a shield against their constant attempts to reshape me, to fit me into the narrow mold they'd carved for me. But beneath that shield, a quiet fire simmered, a need, perhaps, to finally, unequivocally prove them wrong, not with words, but with undeniable action and achievement. This quiet ascent culminated in the insignia of a colonel, the gleaming silver eagles on my shoulders that represented years of relentless dedication, personal sacrifice, and an unwavering commitment to a path I had chosen for myself, regardless of their approval. It wasn't just a rank, it was a statement, a testament to a strength and intelligence they never believed I possessed. I was returning home after what felt like an eternity, but it had only been 7 years since my last proper visit. 7 years of deliberately vague phone calls, of deflected questions about my specific duties, of letting them believe I was still just a minor officer, forever stuck in some administrative role in a forgotten corner of the Pentagon. They assumed my career had plateaued, a convenient excuse for my prolonged absence. Unbeknownst to them, the stage for the inevitable revelation was already set. My father, Wallace Albright, prided himself on Aegis Dynamics, his company, a pillar of the Farnham Ridge community and a growing player in the defense industry. They were on the cusp of securing their most vital defense contract yet, Project Sentinel, a multi-billion-dollar project that, if successful, would catapult Viridian Corp, a subsidiary that Braxton had recently taken the helm of, into the major leagues. This project directly impacted my father's legacy, representing the pinnacle of his career, and would solidify Braxton's burgeoning leadership role within the family empire. The universe, in its own darkly poetic way, had orchestrated the perfect collision course. I, as the Pentagon liaison, was the one personally designated to oversee this very project, responsible for its final approval. The family dinner was, predictably, a strained affair. It was held in the familiar, slightly dated dining room of our Farnham Ridge home, the scent of roast chicken mixing with the heavy perfume of unspoken expectations and a palpable tension. Braxton, always impeccably dressed in a tailored suit, held court at the head of the table. His voice, smooth and confident, filled the space, echoing his self-assured posture. He detailed his work on Project Sentinel, describing the intricate schematics, the cutting-edge technology, and the immense financial implications, all with an air of self-importance that grated on my nerves, but which I met with a serene, almost detached smile. He projected an image of effortless brilliance, a master of his domain. "The security protocols alone are revolutionary, Kira," Braxton declared, looking at me with a patronizing tilt of his head, as if explaining complex calculus to a child. He clearly expected me to be impressed, or at least bewildered. "We're talking about a multi-layered defense system that will be virtually impenetrable. It's the kind of project that changes the game, not just for Viridian, but for national security itself." My mother, Martha, nodded along, her eyes shining with unconcealed pride, a stark contrast to the subtle pity she usually reserved for me. "Braxton has always been so driven, so sharp. He just has a knack for these things, don't you, dear?" she chimed in, her gaze lingering on me for a moment, a silent question about my own lack of corporate ambition, a quiet lament for the path I hadn't chosen. "Indeed," Father Wallace boomed, setting down his fork with a deliberate clink, his voice radiating smug satisfaction. "Braxton is a natural leader. He understands the mechanics of the market, the strategic importance of these ventures. He's truly making a name for himself, a real success story." He emphasized real, a subtle but undeniable jab meant solely for my benefit, a final pronouncement on my perceived shortcomings. He didn't mean it maliciously, I knew. He genuinely believed it. His world was corporate ladders, quarterly reports, and tangible financial gains. My world was abstract data, complex algorithms, cyber warfare, and the quiet, often invisible, protection of millions. He simply couldn't translate my reality into his own limited understanding. I listened, letting their words wash over me, the familiar sting surprisingly absent. The old Kira would have felt a familiar knot of resentment tightening in her stomach, a bitter taste in her mouth, a desperate urge to defend herself. The new Kira, Colonel Atherton, felt nothing but a quiet sense of irony. Every intricate detail Braxton proudly laid out, every buzzword he used, every projected timeline, I already knew it. I knew it intimately. I had reviewed the preliminary proposals, flagged potential vulnerabilities, and cross-referenced their claims with independent classified assessments. My signature, or rather my eventual approval, was literally the linchpin for their multi-billion-dollar future, a fact they were utterly oblivious to. The words, once stinging, now felt truly hollow, knowing the profound truth I held, knowing the profound shift in power that was just hours away, waiting to unfold. It wasn't about vengeance, not really. It was about seeing, about finally being seen for who they wished me to be. The next morning dawned crisp and clear, a typical Montana fall day. The air was cool and invigorating, carrying the scent of pine and damp earth as I drove my rental car towards the glittering glass and steel edifice of Viridian Corp. The building rose sharply from the landscape, a stark contrast to the rustic charm of Farnham Ridge, a modern monument to corporate ambition. It was an architectural statement of power and progress, precisely the kind of place Braxton thrived in, a world of slick surfaces and high-stakes deals. I had dressed meticulously, choosing the full-dress uniform. The crisp navy blue fabric, the perfectly pressed white shirt, the sharp lines, and the gleaming brass buttons felt like a second skin, a tangible representation of my identity. And most importantly, the silver eagles, precisely pinned to each shoulder, caught the morning light as I stepped out of the car, flashing with authority. Their weight felt substantial, grounding, a physical reminder of the years of rigorous training and dedicated service. This wasn't just a uniform, it was an armor, a declaration of who I was. The lobby of Viridian Corp was a symphony of polished marble and hushed efficiency. Executives in tailored suits moved with purpose, their briefcases clutched tight, their voices low and controlled. I strode through the grand entrance, my polished dress shoes echoing slightly on the pristine floor, each step deliberate and confident. Heads turned, whispers followed. A woman in a military uniform, especially one of such obvious rank, was not a common sight in these corporate halls, accustomed to the predictable rhythm of business attire. I kept my gaze straight ahead, a faint, almost imperceptible smile playing on my lips, a silent acknowledgement of the impending drama. Inside the meeting room, Wallace was speaking, his voice resonating with his usual authority. "And remember," he was saying to his executives, "the Pentagon liaison is due any minute. This is a critical first impression. We need to be sharp, articulate, and completely in control. This contract, gentlemen, is our legacy." Braxton, who was reviewing a sheaf of Project Sentinel blueprints, looked up as the door opened further. His eyes, initially dismissive, flickered across my uniform, then widened incrementally as his gaze rose to my face. The faint smile on my lips must have been almost imperceptible, but it was there, a quiet prelude to the coming storm. He blinked once, twice, a flicker of confusion crossing his features. He knew my face, of course, but it was clearly not registering in the context of this high-stakes corporate environment. His brain was trying to reconcile the image of his underachieving sister with the formidable military presence now standing before him. The confusion morphed into a slow, dawning horror. His jaw, usually so firm and confident, visibly slackened. His eyes darted to the silver eagles on my shoulders, then back to my face, then to the insignia again, as if needing confirmation that what he saw was undeniably real. Wallace, hearing the sudden, profound silence that had fallen over the room, turned around, a self-satisfied smile still fixed on his face. His eyes scanned the room, looking for the Pentagon liaison he expected. His gaze landed on me. The smile faltered, then vanished completely. His distinguished features, usually composed and authoritative, crumbled, revealing a raw astonishment. His eyes, so accustomed to seeing me in casual civilian clothes, perhaps a sweater or a simple blouse, widened in profound disbelief. The gray temple seemed to recede, exposing the shock etched on his face. He saw the uniform, the undeniable rank, and then, finally, he saw me, his daughter, Kira, Colonel Atherton. The silence in the room stretched, thick and heavy, punctuated only by the distant hum of the building's ventilation system. No one spoke, no one dared. The air crackled with the unspoken realization that had just slammed into Wallace and Braxton like a physical blow. The high-ranking military official they expected, the individual who held the keys to their multi-billion-dollar future, was their underachieving daughter and sister. I stepped forward, my stride confident, my posture erect. The polished floor seemed to stretch before me, a stage for this long-awaited moment, a silent declaration of my arrival. I extended my hand, first to Wallace, then to Braxton. My voice, when I spoke, was calm, professional, utterly devoid of the familial deference they were accustomed to, my tone betraying no hint of personal history. "Colonel Atherton," I stated, my hand firm in my father's slack, cold, and clammy grasp. "Pentagon liaison for Project Sentinel. It's a pleasure to finally meet you all in this capacity." Wallace managed a strangled sound, a mix of a cough and a gasp, utterly speechless. Braxton, still pale, could only nod, his usual arrogant smirk replaced by a look of sheer, unadulterated awe. He was still holding the Project Sentinel blueprints, and I could see his hands trembling slightly, the paper rustling with his involuntary movements. "I believe we have a presentation to get through," I continued, my voice betraying nothing of the years of quiet ambition, the hours of painstaking work, or the sting of their casual dismissals. I moved to the head of the table, the seat traditionally reserved for the highest-ranking official, the seat of authority. Braxton, still in a daze, instinctively moved aside, allowing me to take the position. The presentation began, but it was no longer Braxton's show. My questions were incisive, penetrating, cutting through his corporate jargon. I didn't ask general questions. I drilled down into specific vulnerabilities in their proposed encryption algorithms, questioned the redundancy measures for their power grids, and challenged the projected timelines for the integration of legacy systems. I spoke with an intimate knowledge of the project that Braxton, for all his corporate rhetoric and rehearsed confidence, clearly lacked. He fumbled for answers, his voice losing its confident edge, replaced by a growing uncertainty and a visible unease. Wallace watched, his face a mask of profound disbelief, occasionally glancing from me to Braxton as if seeing his two children and their respective capabilities for the very first time, a stark comparison laid bare. "Mr. Thorne," I interjected, cutting off Braxton's rambling explanation of a specific network architecture, my voice sharp and clear. "Your proposal states a 99.7% integrity rate for the data transfer protocols. My preliminary analysis indicates that, under high-stress, multi-vector attacks, this drops to closer to 92.3%. Could you elaborate on the discrepancy?" Braxton stammered, his eyes wide with surprise and a hint of fear. "Colonel, with all due respect, our internal simulations, they've shown consistent performance." "And my simulations, using real-world threat models from active cyberfronts, show otherwise," I countered, my tone unwavering, unyielding. "Are you confident in the security of this project if a major state-sponsored entity were to target it?" He swallowed hard, visibly struggling for a response. The room was silent. The other Viridian executives shifted uncomfortably in their seats, sensing the complete power shift, the undeniable reality of the situation. This wasn't a casual inquiry. This was a dissection, a thorough and expert dismantling. This was a colonel, highly specialized, questioning the very core of their most important project, and she knew exactly what she was talking about. She knew it better than they did. I concluded the meeting, or rather, I concluded it. I thanked them for their time, informing them that I would be conducting a thorough review of all their documentation and would schedule follow-up meetings as necessary. My tone was polite, professional, and utterly unyielding, leaving no room for argument or appeal. As the other executives filed out, their expressions a mix of confusion and deference, Wallace remained, his shoulders slumped, appearing smaller than I had ever seen him. Braxton stood beside him, still shell-shocked, his usual swagger completely absent. The heavy oak door clicked shut, leaving the three of us in the vast, silent conference room, the air thick with unspoken truths and years of suppressed emotions. The confrontation, though painful in its honesty, was necessary. It wasn't about vengeance, not truly. It was about finally being seen, truly seen, not as the daughter who chose the wrong path, but as the woman who forged her own, despite their doubts. "Kira," Wallace began, his voice hoarse, devoid of its usual booming confidence. He looked at me, then at the silver eagles on my uniform, then back at me, as if trying to reconcile the two images, struggling to bridge the gap between his perception and the reality before him. I don't understand. Colonel, since when? What is this?" "For years, Dad," I said softly, but firmly, my voice steady and clear. "For years, I've been building a career, specializing in the very systems Braxton is now attempting to implement. I've risen through the ranks, not in some administrative role, but in critical defense operations, protecting vital national interests. I've earned this." I gestured vaguely to my shoulders, to the insignia that now seemed to shine brighter than the polished conference table, reflecting the light of truth. He sank into a chair, his face buried in his hands, the weight of his past judgments crushing him. "All these years, we just thought you were doing something respectable, but nothing like this. We told you that you were squandering your potential. We told you you'd never be anything significant." His voice trailed off, filled with a mixture of shock, profound regret, and, I dared to hope, a burgeoning sense of awe. I had no idea at all. The admission was stark, a complete capitulation of his long-held beliefs. Braxton, who had been listening in stunned silence, finally found his voice, though it was quieter, stripped of its usual bravado. "Colonel, Kira, your questions in there, they were precise. You knew things about Project Sentinel that even I didn't. The vulnerabilities, the simulations." He shook his head slowly, a genuine look of wonder replacing his earlier shock and arrogance. "You're brilliant, absolutely brilliant." It was a stark contrast to the dismissive brother who had lectured me just last night about real success. The shift was palpable, immediate. His arrogance, once a defining characteristic, had been replaced by a humbling awe, a true recognition of superior intellect and expertise. "It wasn't about being better than you, Braxton," I said, looking at him directly, meeting his humbled gaze. "It was about being true to myself, about pursuing a path that resonated with my own strengths, even if it wasn't the one our family envisioned for me." Wallace lifted his head, his eyes red-rimmed, his expression vulnerable. "I'm sorry, Kira," he said, his voice barely a whisper, thick with emotion. He walked closer, his gaze steady, unwavering, no longer judging but seeking understanding. "I saw your choice to join the military as a step backward, a rejection of everything I thought was important. I pushed Braxton so hard into this corporate world because I genuinely believed it was the only path to a real future. I projected my own expectations onto you without ever truly seeing your strengths, your unique genius." He paused, looking directly into my eyes, a deep regret etched on his face. "I apologize, Kira, for every casual dismissal, every subtle jab, every time I made you feel less than. It was never my intention to hurt you, but I see now that I did. I was blind, too proud, too consumed by my own ideas of success to see the extraordinary path you were forging." The apology was raw, heartfelt. It wasn't the kind of perfunctory, "I'm sorry if you felt that way." It was a genuine admission of fault, a complete dismantling of years of ingrained assumptions, of his entire worldview concerning my life choices. A quiet ache, a ghost of past hurts stirred within me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a profound sense of peace. This was it. This was the validation I had unknowingly yearned for, not for them to understand my job, but for them to understand me. For my father, the bedrock of my family's expectations, to admit such profound error was monumental, a true turning point. "I appreciate that, Dad," I said, my voice steady, feeling the ghost of a smile touch my lips, a deep breath escaping me. It wasn't easy, feeling misunderstood, but it also fueled me. It made me determined to prove my worth on my own terms, and perhaps it made me stronger. He managed a small, sad smile, a flicker of understanding lighting his eyes. "And you did, beyond anything I could have ever imagined." He looked at the eagles on my shoulder, then back at me, a profound respect in his gaze. "You are a formidable leader, Kira. More than that, you're an incredible woman. Your mother and I, we are truly proud." The word truly hung in the air, heavy with meaning, carrying the weight of years of unspoken admiration, now finally given voice, a balm to long-held wounds. Over the next few weeks, my presence at Viridian Corp became a fixture. I traded my formal dress uniform for more practical, but still crisp, tactical suits, though the Silver Eagles remained a constant, glinting reminder on my lapel, their presence no longer a shock, but a mark of respect. My days were a blur of deep dives into encrypted code, intensive security audits of their vast networks, and strategy sessions that often stretched late into the night, fueled by strong coffee and an unwavering focus. Wallace, initially hesitant, became a quiet observer, sometimes sitting in on meetings, just listening to me dissect complex cyber architectures or articulate threat vectors with a clarity that seemed to stun his own team. He would often just nod, a new kind of understanding slowly dawning on his face, replacing the old disappointment. I'd catch him watching me, not with the judging eyes of a disappointed father, but with the quiet contemplation of a man whose worldview was being reshaped, brick, by the undeniable evidence of my expertise. There were moments when I caught him staring at the eagles on my shoulder, a faint, almost reverent look in his eyes, as if he was finally grasping the true weight and significance of what they represented.
Braxton, too, had undergone a significant transformation. The initial shock had given way to a genuine desire to learn, a refreshing intellectual curiosity. He no longer spoke with the same condescending tone. Instead, he approached me with questions, sometimes even requests for guidance, eager to absorb my knowledge. He was still ambitious, still driven, but now there was a humility, a recognition of expertise that transcended the corporate hierarchy he was so accustomed to. He started calling me Colonel in professional settings, a respectful acknowledgement of my rank, and Kira with a newfound respect in private. He frequently asked me to explain the nuances of quantum cryptography, the intricacies of a zero-day exploit, or the strategic implications of a nation-state cyber attack. I saw a hunger in his eyes, not just for corporate success, but for genuine understanding, a desire to master a complex and vital field. He was no longer just his father's son, blindly following a prescribed path. He was becoming his own person, shaped by this unexpected encounter with a reality far more complex and intellectually demanding than his boardroom presentations. He even confessed, one evening after a particularly grueling review of their network architecture, the usual slick confidence in his voice replaced by a surprising vulnerability. "Honestly, Kira," he admitted, running a hand through his slicked-back hair, "I was flying blind on some of this. The corporate side, the financial projections, that's my wheelhouse. But the deep tech, the real vulnerabilities, I was trusting consultants. Having you here, someone who actually knows the enemy's playbook, it's a game changer. You're saving my reputation, probably my career, and the company's future." It was an astonishing admission, a far cry from his previous arrogance, a humbling moment that solidified a new kind of bond between us. One afternoon, I found Wallace waiting for me by the panoramic window in my temporary office at Veridian. He was looking out at the sprawling Montana landscape, but his mind was clearly elsewhere, deep in thought. He turned as I entered, a thoughtful, almost solemn expression on his face. "Kira," he began, his voice softer and more sincere than I'd ever heard it in a professional setting, devoid of any pretense. "I've been reviewing some of your reports. The depth of your analysis, it's truly remarkable. The insights you've provided on the vulnerabilities of our legacy systems, the potential attack vectors we hadn't even considered." He shook his head slowly, a genuine awe in his eyes. "You've saved us, financially and reputationally, from a potential catastrophe. Project Sentinel would have been a disaster without your intervention." I simply nodded, accepting the compliment without fanfare. It wasn't about praise for praise's sake. It was about the acknowledgement of competence, the recognition of the years I'd poured into mastering my craft. The quiet satisfaction that settled over me was far more profound than any grand accolade. "I was so wrong about you," he continued, his voice thick with emotion, his gaze steady, unwavering, reflecting a deep, personal regret. He walked closer, his posture no longer that of the imposing patriarch, but of a man humbled. "I saw your choice to join the military as a step backward, a rejection of everything I thought was important. I pushed Braxton so hard into this corporate world because I genuinely believed it was the only path to a real future. I projected my own expectations onto you without ever truly seeing your strengths, your unique genius." He paused, looking directly into my eyes, a plea for understanding in his gaze. "I apologize, Kira, for every casual dismissal, every subtle jab, every time I made you feel less than. It was never my intention to hurt you, but I see now that I did. I was blind, too proud, too consumed by my own ideas of success to see the extraordinary path you were forging." The apology was raw, heartfelt, completely unreserved. It wasn't the kind of perfunctory, "I'm sorry if you felt that way" apology. It was a genuine admission of fault, a complete dismantling of years of ingrained assumptions, a tearing down of the walls he had built around his own perceptions. A quiet ache, a ghost of past hurts stirred within me, but it was quickly overshadowed by a profound sense of peace, a warmth spreading through my chest. This was it. This was the validation I had unknowingly yearned for. Not for them to understand my job, but for them to understand me, Kira. For my father, the bedrock of my family's expectations, to admit such profound error was monumental, a true testament to the power of truth. I appreciate that, Dad, I said, my voice steady, feeling a genuine, unburdened smile touch my lips. It wasn't easy, feeling misunderstood, but it also fueled me. It made me determined to prove my worth on my own terms, and perhaps it made me stronger for it. He managed a small, sad smile, a flicker of genuine pride in his eyes. And you did, beyond anything I could have ever imagined. He looked at the eagles on my shoulder, then back at me, a profound respect now evident in his gaze. You are a formidable leader, Kira. More than that, you're an incredible woman. Your mother and I, we are truly proud. The word truly hung in the air, heavy with meaning, carrying the weight of years of unspoken admiration, now finally given voice, a balm to long-held wounds. Later that week, Martha came to visit me at the temporary residence the Pentagon had arranged. She brought a homemade apple pie, still warm, filling the small apartment with a comforting scent, a scent that evoked memories of a simpler time. She didn't talk about Viridian or Project Sentinel, the world of corporate defense. She talked about Farnham Ridge, about the subtle changes in the town, about her vibrant garden, about her quiet anxieties as a mother, anxieties that had shaped her perceptions. And then, as we sat at the small kitchen table, the aroma of cinnamon and baked apples between us, she reached across and took my hand, her touch infinitely tender. "Your father told me," she said, her eyes soft, glistening slightly, "about everything, about the Colonel, about what you do. I always knew you were smart, Kira. Always."
From the time you were a little girl, you saw the world differently. You thought differently. You had a spark, a unique way of looking at things. But I worried. I worried about you being so far away, doing something we didn't understand. We just wanted you to be happy, to be safe. We thought the corporate world was safer, more secure. We thought it was the only path to a stable, respected life. She squeezed my hand gently, her touch infinitely tender. We were foolish, so very, very foolish. And I'm so sorry we didn't see it sooner, that we didn't see you sooner. As a mother, I should have trusted your instincts, your path, more. I'm so proud of the woman you've become, Kira, a true leader, doing such important work for our country. Her words, less about my accomplishments and more about her maternal anxieties, resonated deeply. It wasn't an apology for dismissing my career, but for failing to truly see her daughter, for letting her own fears dictate her vision of my future. It was an acknowledgement of a mother's blind spot, born of love, but ultimately misguided. This was a different kind of healing, softer, more intimate, a deeper reconciliation. "It's okay, Mom," I said, my voice thick, a lump forming in my throat, the words a gentle release. The tears that had never come during the confrontation in the boardroom, the tears that had never surfaced during years of silent ambition, pricked at my eyes now. These were not tears of sadness or bitterness, but of release, of finally being understood, not just on a professional level, but on a deeply personal, familial one. It truly is. I squeezed her hand back, feeling a warmth spread through me that had nothing to do with the pie and everything to do with connection and acceptance. Project Sentinel moved forward, transformed by my rigorous oversight. The vulnerabilities I identified were meticulously patched. The systems I advised on were implemented with heightened security. And the entire team at Viridian, now under Braxton's genuinely respectful leadership, rose to the challenge. Their respect for my expertise palpable in every meeting, every interaction. The contract was secured, lauded by the Pentagon as a model for future defense initiatives. It was a resounding success, not just for Viridian, but for national security, and profoundly for me. It stood as a tangible monument to my expertise, a silent testament to years of unseen dedication and quiet resilience. My time in Farnham Ridge eventually drew to a close. My mission accomplished, my review complete, it was time to return to my duties, to the world where my unique skills were truly valued. The morning I left, Wallace and Braxton were there, standing by my rental car, the crisp Montana air invigorating. The mountains loomed majestically in the distance, silent witnesses to the profound shifts that had occurred within our family. Wallace looked older, perhaps, but also lighter,
as if a great weight had been lifted from his shoulders, replaced by a quiet contentment. Braxton stood tall, his posture more assured, but his gaze no longer held a hint of arrogance. Instead, there was a genuine respect, a quiet admiration that spoke volumes, far more than any past boast. "Will missed you, Kira," Wallace said, his voice surprisingly firm and steady, reaching out to hug me, a gesture that felt more genuine and warm than any embrace I could remember from my childhood, infused with a new understanding. "And will be following your career, with pride." Braxton stepped forward, extending his hand, his grip firm and sincere. "Thank you, Colonel," he said, a genuine smile on his face, no longer forced or patronizing. "You taught me more in a few weeks than I've learned in years, about real leadership, about real expertise." And, he added, a slight awkwardness in his tone that was endearing, a sign of his growing self-awareness, about what it truly means to follow your own path, even when it's unconventional. I shook his hand firmly, a full, unburdened smile gracing my lips. "Keep learning, Braxton, and keep pushing. You have potential, a lot of it. Just make sure it's your potential you're pursuing, not someone else's definition of it." As I drove away from Viridian Corp., the gleaming skyscraper receding in my rearview mirror, I felt a profound sense of closure. The journey hadn't been about revenge, not truly, not in the petty sense. It was about proving my worth on my own terms, about forging a path independent of expectations, and about finally being seen, not just as their daughter or sister, but as Colonel Kira Atherton, a leader in her own right, a force to be reckoned with in a world they were only just beginning to understand. The silence in the car was no longer a shield, a barrier against their judgment, but a quiet, resonant hum of peace, a reflection of my inner calm. The satisfaction wasn't a fleeting triumph, but a deep, abiding contentment. I had earned my respect, not through their understanding, but through my own relentless dedication to a calling they could now finally appreciate. The sun rose higher over the Montana mountains, casting long, golden shadows, illuminating a path that was now unequivocally my own. I was no longer a puzzle to them, nor an enigma to myself. I was simply Kira, confident in my chosen path and finally truly seen.